Okay, so in this session, I really wanted to show you a little bit more how you can dive into using the prompt pages, specifically in this interactive doc, but it's structured similarly in the PDF. So a lot of the principles are the same. Now, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I find it really helpful for me to come to the PDF first and kind of handwrite and brain dump and just get my ideas kind of scrawled on paper in a really messy way. But then when I want to do more development, I'll usually come and open my computer. So at that point, I might come over to the interactive doc on Google, and I'm showing you here a real version. That I created through this prompt. And you can see the final draft version in the example stories. And I went from start to finish, just like you would through these tools. So here in this free response area, I kind of just typed up the first things that came to mind, really messy. I kind of just brought over what I had handwritten on paper, just ideas. You can see I use a lot of ellipses. Like this is really just stream of consciousness. Don't interrupt yourself. Let the thoughts flow. No structure needs to be really considered at this point. Just access your memories. Let each of these questions, activate some thoughts, feelings, memories, stories to emerge. And even as you're using these prompts, it doesn't have to be linear. So use whatever questions really draw something out of you and follow that thread that emerges. And then maybe once you've run out, of thoughts from that, then come back to maybe the next question or another one. And it doesn't have to be every single one. Just they're designed to get you going, right? Get you started. And then as you scroll down to this next section, the story structure elements, I've tried to weave in some simple methods without overwhelming you, because really a lot of the philosophy behind this is to unlearn the standards of learning that we may have been ingrained in us in school that makes writing feel like very prescribed and very limiting, and we've lost the fun and the creativity of it, or it's the prescribed methods of writing feel not safe enough for our sensitive stories as sensitive-souled people, and people who carry very sacred stories. And so I want you to come to this structure, the story structure, with autonomy, and I want you to come to the story structure with creative license, and I want this to be a liberatory practice, not a prescribed one, right? So here are some general good practices when we tell a story. There are also ways that help support our brain and our memory and how it works, right? So we start with context. Let's paint the scene. Let's think about the sensory details of that moment. Let's give background that feels relevant, that keeps us sort of focused on that story, that doesn't deep dive into 10 other stories. We want to kind of hone it in and come to that moment in time. So for example, in this story, my brain brought me to two things. One, I'm currently at 36, almost 37 years old, reconnecting with singing again, and I feel like a novice. But as I was looking at these prompts, my memory sparked and took me back to when I was a novice in this very same action last time, which was as a little kid, and how much I loved it. And I, wrote this whole story to kind of compare and contrast, originally compare and contrast being a novice then at 6 or 7 years old to being a novice now 30 years later. But then a whole another storyline emerged through that, and that was how singing was tied to me processing grief and honoring my grandmother in her passing. And that's how funny, or that's how miraculous story work goes, right? Literally in writing this story, I gathered the layers of myself, my childhood self, my mother's self, my granddaughter's self, who's just lost my grandmother, and found a creative way and an authentic and true way, a powerful way for me to process some of that grief. I wasn't even expecting that I was going to tell you all this in this tutorial video, but I hope it helps. And so it started, I'm just narrating my experience with this. when I came to the context, the sensory details I had was sitting outside in those pine trees as a child singing because I was too shy to sing in front of anybody else. And so I gave that relevant background. Then it was initial encounter with the new skill. Oh yeah, I remember borrowing this VHS tape from the library and watching this contralto woman sing, and it inspired me so much to sing. And she talked about how she developed the skills of singing. And so I mimicked her, right? As a novice, I started through mimicry, through imitation. So I talk about that early on in the story, and some of the feelings and thoughts that emerged when I took myself back to that memory, right? And then I go through development. Oh, actually, it's so funny. This I'm looking now at this outline, and it doesn't develop so much. That childhood story had developed that more in further pages when I came to the final draft. But I started with actually feeling shame and embarrassment both times. As a child, I would feel like that shy or that shame of other people watching me, and even now as an adult, right? I re-encountered that. And then I did connect it to my grandma's passing here, right? Okay, so then in development, we have a chance to sort through that like muddle of thoughts and feelings that come up, and dialogue, and oftentimes other people's voices emerges. And then we start to sit with, wait, so where's my voice in all of this? Or was it others? Um, or what moments and experiences took me away, caused deviation. Not that deviation happens in everybody's story, but like, we start to follow the plot line, like in a movie. Like, what are all the things that make getting to the final outcome, like the final like happy ending, feel like it's going to be derailed or make it feel hard? Like, oftentimes in our life, sometimes it's just internal struggles, or sometimes it's a dialogue where we internalize something that someone else said to us. In my story, if you read my example story, you'll notice I make brief mention of two things in my life. The depression I went through when my mother left in college, and how singing felt healing to me, but also, I wasn't singing for myself. And then also like this other period where my boyfriend broke up with me, and I didn't have a home, and like just hardship, right? So in the hardship, I lost my voice even further, and I was disconnected from singing. And so then I just paragraph by paragraph, like trace the development back to finding my voice, which really like the pivotal moment of that was sitting at my grandmother's deathbed and singing then for her, and then making a choice after she passed to play again with my voice and reacquaint myself with my voice, in the presence this time of my children and my husband. So that became very memorable and empowering for me, and I tell that story. And the resolution, then I close with some lessons, like, wow, if I learned this now, or if this moment moves me in this way, this is what I want my audience to experience if they read this story or hear this story, right? And the lesson, and really the lesson for me in my example, was my grandmother embodied it. Like, you do not have to be great at anything to do that thing, especially if it makes you happy. And so that's what I embed into my story. And I wrote a story here unexpectedly as I was creating this book for you all that I love so much, that healed me. And I read it to my children, and I can't wait to read it again. And I hope that you have these type of experiences with your stories here. Okay, there's more to this page now. So now you created a beautiful story that you love, that healed you and freed you, and hopefully goes on to have that same effect on the people that you choose to share it with. And so now in this final section, we're going to talk about your choices that you're going to make with this story. And it's at this moment that I start to think about audience, because I don't want consideration of the audience or what their voices are, what their thoughts are, to like rob me of that experience that I just walked you through, that I had all for myself. And at some point, maybe in the creating process, like I invited my grandmother in because she's crossed over now, and this really became a story to honor her lessons. And so at one moment, it was really between me and my grandmother, and it was in this like sacred space. I don't know why I jumped to communities, but it was this like sacred space between me and my grandmother. Now, some stories stay in the sacred space for quite a long time, months, years even, especially if it's linked to trauma or something more sensitive or involvement with other people, and that those relationships are tricky and require care and, thought and discernment. But other stories like this one, I quickly felt so empowered by this story and thought, oh, I'd love to share this within my communities. And I think actually right away as I wrote it, right after I wrote it, I sent it to like my writing partner. And so, shared within my inner circle. And then now I would say you're within my communities because you're part of my learning community. So you see this example in my book, right? So it's shared with my communities. But actually, I'll show you this. I felt so empowered by this story. I just submitted it to Roxanne Gay's publication because I saw a call for submissions and it fit the bill. And I was like, regardless of the outcome, I'm ready to share this with the world. Not even bypass my loyal audiences, right? Like, let's go straight to the public because this story in particularly feels ready. Not every story will feel like that. And then I might type in more detail. Like, originally it was just for my communities. And I'm like, people in this course, I really want you to lean into your novice experience because that's where we really give ourselves permission to be bad at something, but also to like reclaim our joy in that thing, right? Okay, so then I spoke a little bit now about the core lesson. Like, what do I want my audience to have? And that was like encouragement to be bad, even like if you're be bad at it, if you love it, right? If you love it, if it makes you happy, just do that thing. Maybe you'll get better. In my grandma's case, go read that story. She never got better. She lived to be 85 years old and she never got better at singing, but she loved it. So she never stopped doing it. She would sing to the Lord. She would sing to her communities. She would sing for Christmas. She would sing to us. Like, she never got better. And what a lesson. I want to encourage you all with that same lesson that she bestowed on me. So my intended sharing outcome from that is, encouragement and inspiration. I want to inspire you to like do the thing you love, even badly, right? Go inspire others. We need it, right? So you can type in those little notes as you go. And then finally, where do you want to publish it? And like I mentioned before, you can make these drop-down menus work for you. So like I chose to publish it in this book. That's the first place I'm publishing it. And then, you can take note of which date you want to publish it and how. And this story is, see, I don't see anything on here that really relates to it. It was a narrative for sure. It was a narrative. And if you want to add more, because if it's like something that includes, it was a narrative and it was uplifting, I feel like was the tone for this, right? So it's a Google Doc. That's not spelled correctly, but yeah. So you can type notes to yourself. You can also right click and then what do you do? So you can add comments to yourself if you want to add more detail. Just don't be limited. Just find yourself, express yourself, heal yourself, have fun. I hope this video helps. Let me know if there's any questions, drop them down in the community so that I can be supportive if there's anything that feels like a friction point to you. I know I went more in depth with this, but I really hope that I gave you enough support to really feel like you can get started, like you can dig in, that you can know how to navigate the document itself, and that also you know how to do this work, the story work, and unlearn the ways of writing and being academic that maybe feel limiting and that have held you back from your stories, and just come to these pages and this interactive document in a fresh way and play around and see what happens. And then let me know. I can't wait. Okay, I'll see you next time.